Hello everyone who are right in front of me right now. My name is Lê Gia Huy from Lê Quý Đôn Tân Mai High School, and today I'm going to talk about a very hot topic, that is inequality in life. So what is inequality? What do we know about it? Well, to put it simply, it is the people's behavior towards each other. And in this case, it is the unfairness treatment that some of us may experience either in our relationships, workplaces, or even in our families. And there are also many types of inequality as well, such as racial or gender differences. One of which that I'm going to talk about today is the unbalanced nature between the rich and the poor. So within our day-to-day life, we see countless people wandering around on the street. On one hand, we see those who dress in the most filthy and torn-out clothes. Maybe they are having a disabled limb or two. Not to mention, they have to do things such as hard labor duties or even begging in order to make ends meet. Then on the other hand, we see people dressed in the most modest of clothes, having expensive jewelries and cosmetics on their bodies, maybe able to drive cars and probably having a fancy dinner somewhere. That is the ugly truth that has happened around us every single day, yet we fail to notice it, or rather ignored it entirely. So to show a better picture of how this phenomenon has affected the people's lives, we need to dive deeper into the iceberg. So first, let's look at the poor. What makes a person poor? The most common thing that we all know is that they don't have money. They're broke. They can't make money efficiently enough so to have a better life. But then that begs the question, why? Well, some of these people can afford a proper education when they are young, so when they grow up, they are unqualified for a job to earn money. Maybe they are missing a degree of some sort. But then there are those who maybe lack the skills to actually earn cash themselves. Maybe they are lazy or unenthusiastic. Therefore, they are unemployed because no company wants to hire them. It is important to keep track of where you are right now, what you have done in the past, and what you will be doing in the future. And the rich does just that, as well as having everything that poor doesn't. But with that all out of the way, the world is still drowning in poverty. One such place is in the Latin America, specifically in the capital of Peruvian. There is a giant wall measured up to around 10 kilometers called the Wall of Shame that separates the most polished and beautiful part of the city from the more ugly and filthy slum area where trash can be seen covers the surface of earth. This country is one of the prime examples of how poverty has negatively affects the people's life, having a physical barrier that separates and keeping out unwanted citizens from maybe damaging the country image may sound cruel and unrealistic, yet it still exists out there in our own world. Another thing is that similar barriers, either visible or not, are also being built all over the world, which means that in countries like Vietnam, it may suffer the same fate as others. But that is not the end of the story yet. As we all know or experience ourselves, the economy is now starting to revolve more around those who can afford. What I mean is that as the empire of capitalism starts to expand out more and more, the money now have a very significant role in controlling a person's life. For instance, those who have enough finances to follow the flow of money ought to be successful in one way or another, but those who don't, well, they will be pushed out of the economy and then being left with a rather tough life with limited options to choose from. We can clearly see this through inflations of developing countries like Laos or Vietnam, where the price of every single thing rises every single minute, namely gas and daily products, while the salaries of most workers stays the same for maybe a year or even a decade. This then further pushed the poverty line of many regions around the world down even further, therefore making lives of so many others suffer along the way. Another example is that when looking at India, it has one of the fastest growing economy in the world, yet it is also one of the most unbalanced countries out there. Around 1/10% of the entire country's population holds 30% of the entire country's wealth in their hands, while the majority of the people may struggle to even live a basic life. A lot of them don't have access to proper medical care or medical supplies. Therefore, India is now responsible for around 17% of maternal deaths and over 21% of the children's death. These numbers are on a global scale, so you must understand how serious this problem has affected the country. But then, what can we actually do to solve this problem? The first thing that comes to mind for most of the people is what other government will do. After all, they are, for the most part, responsible for an entire country as well. So of course, actions are to be expected, and they did. The government have actually done various drastic measures to actually solve this crisis. Maybe they build homes for homeless people or create job opportunities for those who need, all which are to shorten the gap between the rich and the poor. However, that hasn't impacted much on the world itself because it only contributes to a very small part over the grand scheme of things. The rest lies in the inhabitant itself, the ones like you and me. So what can we actually do to help? Well, some of you may have thought about the answer already, that is charity. We as citizens now have a very easy access to the social media or the internet compared to the older generations. So why don't you take on charity for size? Donations is a very promising method for adults who have a very spare money to actually help people. But for the like of us, who are just students, maybe having an unstable finance state, may prefer a more physical work, like charity work. As a student in the modern era, we can actually find and join many websites and communities that dedicated to helping others. And with just a few steps and clicks away, we can actually set up a very sturdy foundation. After all that have been done, we can then actually take our actions to put into practice. Maybe going out into remote areas and helping those in need. And that is all for the things that I can deliver to you for what we can do. But there's still one more important note that to keep in mind, that is not to leave yourself out. Don't get me wrong, helping others is good in its own ways. But in order to do so, we need to be in a really good state, especially students and teenagers in general. So study hard, pay attention to your health. Focus on yourself first, then keep track of others around you. That is the exact order in which you should do, so no more society burdens could be born from Generation Zs like us. And remember this, the future is in our own hands. You can either choose to be a hobo living out on the streets and depends on the people passing by you, or you can choose to be a very successful businessman that help others on the fly. So, what will be your future and what will you choose? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.